When Kennedy first learned that the Soviets had deployed their missiles to Cuba, he was outraged. The question was not would they accept it, it was how they were going to get those missiles removed.
We need to do two kinds of things. First, we need to develop a specific strike plan. The second thing we have to do is to consider the consequences. I don't know quite what kind of a world we live in after we've struck Cuba.
When Kennedy is considering an airstrike, it's not clear how precise the bombing will be. And you're dealing with nuclear weapons. What if one missile gets launched? One nuclear missile could kill hundreds of thousands of people. One.
The general imbalance is the ratio of 17-1 between the United States and the Soviet Union in deliverable nuclear firepower. But it all depends on how much damage are you willing to sustain. What's unacceptable for you? And for the American administration, even one nuclear warhead on a major city, New York, Washington, Chicago, any major city, would be unacceptable damage.
Soviet Union, would be destroyed, and we would only lose a third of our population. Now, when you think, someone thinks you only lose a third of your population and you won a war, you're sort of left the world of reality.
The story is amazing, the story of deception. Under the nose of the US intelligence, the Soviets were able to transport close to 42,000 military personnel, innumerable amounts of ammunition, nuclear missiles to Cuba. The deployment is an incredible military feat.
There's no success military operation without secrecy. My father thought what he have to do. We have to send very powerful signal to Americans. Don't invade Cuba. We are serious.
Cuba seems to have the same effect on American political leaders that the full moon once had on werewolves. We may not froth at the mouth, but we simply can't deal rationally with Cuba.
There was a revolution in Cuba led by Fidel Castro in 1959, and in 1960, Castro declared Cuba to be a socialist state, allied to the Soviet Union. Cuba had been a playground for Americans. They would fly down there, they would go gambling, the nightlife was wonderful, the beaches were wonderful. So it was kind of seen by many Americans as an extension of the United States and as a legitimate extension of the United States.
We had been expecting the invasion since the end of 1960. The logic of the relationship between Cuba and the United States obviously led anyone to believe that there was going to be some sort of invasion. Cuba was ready to fight.
Castro saw Kennedy as a significant threat to the very existence and future, not only of the Cuban Revolution, but of Cuba itself. He is convinced that the Kennedy brothers, being the competitive men that he understands them to be, people who hate to lose, will eventually try and overcome their loss at the Bay of Pigs by invading Cuba again, this time openly with the US military. And that is why he accepts the idea of having these missiles on his territory and the danger that came with it.
Khrushchev likes Castro a lot. It was a lot of early love, dynamic infatuation, flirting, but not completely trusting each other yet, trying to kind of feel each other out, trying to establish the boundaries of the relationship.
Castro may have liked the idea of having the missiles on Cuban soil. It certainly turned Cuba into a major player in the strategic game. But Castro recommended that they not try to do it secretly. He pointed out the difficulty of that. The U.S. has U-2 spy planes overhead almost every day. Wouldn't it be far better to do it openly? Let's sign a new mutual defense agreement.
Fidel was never in favor of putting the rockets in secretly. Never. We had the right to defend ourselves and to have the arms that we needed to defend ourselves, even if those arms were nuclear and 90 miles from the United States. We had the right to do it. But Khrushchev wasn't in favor of that. He said once we had all the rockets here, the United States would know about it and would be able to do absolutely nothing. That was a big mistake.
From October 15th until October 22nd, John Kennedy kept the existence of these missiles in Cuba a secret.
We knew what the Russians were up to. So long as they didn't know that we knew, we might have time to plan our response. JFK, that first morning, asked of us every possible option he had. Military options, every possible diplomatic option, even the possibility of doing nothing at all, though he himself felt that the country would not stand for that.
Cuban Missile Crisis presented Kennedy with a very acute personal challenge, where none of his glamour, his good looks, his religion, his rhetoric, none of the previous virtues, if that's what they were, that went into the Kennedy success story applied any longer in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He couldn't count on any of those. And he's left all alone with a system that's producing all kinds of hot-headed advice.
The nemesis of John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis is thought to be General Curtis LeMay, the gruff and grumpy general who really wanted to just blow Cuba to smithereens.
When LeMay was asked what would he do with Cuba, he said, "I'll fry it," and he meant it.
LeMay and all the chiefs, all four services, want to go to war. This is what they do.
I just don't see any other solution except the direct military intervention right now. Itself would never risk a major war. Well, it was Iraq and Cuba. Citizens what kind of response does Khrushchev have? A blockade and political calm. A lot of our friends and missiles have made a pretty weak response to this. It was our thought that pretty bad thing.
Tense. You know, it had never happened before. The people in the White House weren't the most experienced in the world. The Joint Chiefs weren't the most flexible. So there were weaknesses everywhere one turned.
The Joint Chiefs opposed the blockade, in particular a negotiated solution. They thought we should go in and hit the Russians with everything we had, as one of them said. Sounded pretty good, sounded pretty tough.
Kennedy asked his top air chiefs, "Can you assure me that a U.S. airstrike would be surgical, go and knock out all Soviet missiles?" And they tell him, "No, sir. There's a high probability we'd get most of them. There is a possibility of some people in the southeastern part of the United States dying in a nuclear attack."
So it finally comes down that no matter how many advisors you have, frequently they are divided, and the president must finally choose.